Welcome to the sixth and final session of Making It Work. I'm Level Holder, and I'm a board member of Princeton Arts Alumni, or PA2, as we call it for short. And we're so glad you're all here today, especially our three phenomenal panelists, who I think so highly of, and I'm so excited to talk to this evening. Um, as I think many of you know who are tuning in tonight, the Making It Work series was created to answer a question of how PA2 members have been asking recently, which is how do you make it work in a career in the arts? How do you balance creative life with work, with everything? And so that's what this series has kind of been trying to dive into. So, our session tonight, we've tentatively been calling corporate hygiene for artists. So, it's all about sort of when we think of the artist as their own kind of one person corporation, we have some great people here to give some advice about things they've learned from their perspective interfacing with in various capacities authors, nonprofits, startups, and just to kind of give some best business practices about how to then embark on launching a project or oneself. Um, as has been the case with some of our past sessions, we have a structure that's been working pretty well, which is basically divided into what our panelists have loved about their profession, what they've learned in their profession, and what they would advise you all look out for in relation to their profession. So that's kind of what we're going to be embarking on this evening, and we will be saving some room for any questions at the end, which you can always drop in the chat. And now I will hand it over to our wonderful Victoria, who will introduce everybody.
Hi, y'all. Yes, I am Victoria, also associated with PA2. First, you are being recorded. I just wanted to remind you all that we're audio and visual recording this for a resource that PA2 is building to basically help folks who maybe couldn't be here right now, but in the future will have similar questions. Um, Please be sure that you're subscribed to PA2 newsletters and socials to find out more about that. And to be part of future programming that we're working on. Right now, we have an alum to alum mentorship program that has been very popular. I just dropped some subscribe and follow links in the chat. And now I will introduce our lovely panel. So, starting with Dawn Seitz, a limited partner and senior advisor to two venture funds and an active early stage technology investor with Princeton Alumni Angels and HBS Alumni Angels. In these capacities, Dawn advises many founders across various industry sectors. Additionally, as the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement for Princeton's Office of Innovation, Dawn interacts with thousands of alumni entrepreneurs, founders, investors, and those who care deeply about Princeton's entrepreneurial community. He also engages frequently with both faculty and student entrepreneurs on campus, supporting their startup journeys and making connection with venture capital and industry colleagues. Stacy Testa is a senior literary agent at Writers House, where she represents a wide range of award-winning and best-selling literary fiction, historical fiction, book club fiction, romance, memoir, self-help, and narrative nonfiction. Her clients include Kim Michelle Richardson, author of the million-copy best-selling novel The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, Sarah Wilson, mental health advocate and author of the New York Times bestseller First We Make the Beast Beautiful, Sarah Vaughn, author of psychological thriller Anatomy of a Scandal, now a Netflix miniseries, and our own Level Holder, author of the forthcoming novel, The Book of Luke. Carlo Frem is the founder of Narrative Twist, a new strategy and creative studio built on one simple idea. Marketing is psychology at scale. A Princeton psychology graduate turned brand strategist, Carlo has spent over 12 years driving customer acquisition and engagement for Fortune 500 brands by combining behavioral insights with bold storytelling. His work has spanned budgets of over $50 million, including global IP launches such as The Lord of the Rings, Borat 2, Coming to America, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and The Boys, as well as collaborations with athletes and creators with over 40 million global followers. And finally, our moderator Level Holder has produced the critically acclaimed feature films The Surrender, Peak Season, Midday Black, Midnight Blue, The End of Us, Working Man, Some Freaks, and Loserville, which he also directed. He recently celebrated the theatrical release of his feature film adaptation of the play Lavender Men, which he directed, co-wrote, and produced. Collectively, his films have screened at over 100 festivals worldwide, including South by Southwest, Santa Barbara, Fantasia, Outfest, and BFI. His a previously mentioned debut novel, The Book of Luke, will be published by Grand Central Publishing in hardcover and audiobook in fall 2025. And if you are even more curious about these folks who are incredibly accomplished, and that wasn't even their full bios, I'll be dropping the link to those bios in the chat. So I'll let you all take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Victoria. And wow, I'm impressed with everybody here. This is great. What a brain trust. So yeah, on the subject of what you love about how you've interfaced with artists throughout your career, I'd love to start with you, Dawn, because in so many ways, a startup and these entrepreneurs are so there's an art to it as well. So I'm so curious, what do you love about dealing with these companies and uplifting them to help them find their paths into the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks again for having me join this very illustrious panel discussion. I look forward to contributing my perspectives on it. It's really interesting as a venture capitalist and angel investor. What I really enjoy is meeting and learning about the passions and convictions and visions of the founders themselves. I'm a very founder-centric investor, uh, and those folks that I invest in typically are also those folks that I can, be very helpful to and advise and mentor them. Um, and the key learning is, and the backstory, by the way, why I think it's so relevant to artists as well is, the backstory is, as Victoria mentioned, I had the opportunity to work at Princeton's Office of Innovation and put on all kinds of programs to build the Princeton Entrepreneurial Network. And that effort very much focused, had an emphasis on also exploring the intersection of entrepreneurship and arts, working with PA2, Lewis Center for the Arts, McCarter Theater, several of the departments across campus, because this intersection was really critical, and I'll get back to some of that maybe later in the discussion. But as it relates to the founder, and Carlo is a great example of a founder in the art space, and all of us, are really entrepreneurs at heart, I believe. Maybe we call ourselves something differently, but it's the mindset of founders, whether you're in the arts or in technology, as my background has been in most of my career, which is really interesting. And the mindset I look for in founders, regardless of what area they're focused on, are things around this concept of grit and resilience. Artists probably epitomize those traits better than almost any other founder that I've ever run into. But it is this similarity between founders in brand, personal branding efforts by artists versus those of maybe a different kind of startup, which is so critical. Optimism and resilience are other traits that I really find to be important for founders, but also very common, whether the person is a startup founder or an artist. And then something also that Carlo mentioned in Victoria's comments, storytelling is so critical. Whether in my world, right, you tell stories because you're trying to raise capital, or you tell stories around the company's mission because you're trying to attract that first employee or maybe even that first customer. And all those traits are so applicable to the world of the arts as well. And that's what I find really fun and what I'm most passionate about.
No, that's so wonderful, Don. And a lot of that resonated with me. In fact, Stacy and I have been in conversations today about how to tailor a story to make sure that it is at its most commercial and dynamic. So that's a perfect pivot. We'll just go in order of class here to pivot to the wonderful Stacy Testa, my agent, who I adore beyond measure. And I was also her RCA when we were at Princeton. Um, but I'll throw the same question to you, Stacey. Kind of, what do you love about working so intimately with your authors? Because you have so many that are spanning so many different genres.
Yeah. Great question. It's so fun to be on a panel with you. And I just want to apologize if I don't know if you guys can hear my 8-month-old crying in the background. So I'm sorry if you're having any cross noise. I try to keep myself on mute when I'm not talking. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love this career, as an agent, the pleasure of sort of being able to work directly with artists to help them bring their creative vision to fruition and then to help get that creative vision in front of readers. I mean, it's wonderful to create art that you love, but it's no fun to create it in a vacuum. I feel like the satisfaction often it comes from the creation and then it comes from actually getting it in front of an audience and getting it in front of readers. And it's such a pleasure for me to be able to facilitate that process. I think the thing that is most satisfying for me and sort of the success stories is like the growth. I've been doing this for 15 years and I've worked with a lot of my clients for many of those years. And it's really, really satisfying to see them built over those years and to see the hard work and the efforts and all the little decisions that you make, day in, day out and year over year build to something greater. So it's obviously amazing when you have those projects that click straight out the gate. The book that, you take the debut client on and you take their project out on submission and it sells at auction for 6 figures and they're, it's a big bestseller straight out the gate. That's awesome. Obviously, that's very satisfying. But honestly, sometimes it's more satisfying to have those like slow build moments where you really like have that steady trajectory of growth. So, one example for me in this space would be one of the clients that Victoria mentioned in my bio, Kim Michelle Richardson. She was the first client I ever took on when I was a baby agent. I found her in the slush. It was just a random submission. She, at the time, she had sort of self-published a memoir, but had never published fiction before, was writing a novel for the first time in her 50s, didn't have an MFA or any platform or any traction, but I saw something in her writing that I felt like was really special. And I thought that I could work with her to build something. And now, in her first book, we sold for a very small amount of money to a small indie publisher and it did okay. And then the next one did a little bit better. And the next one, and then her fourth novel was a big breakout success and has sold 1 million copies. And we're now 7 novels and 2 children's picture books into the process. And that's incredibly satisfying to me to think like where we started to where we got to. I hope you don't mind my mentioning level, for us working together, the book that you have coming out in December is not the book that we started our career relationship on together. We started with something else that we couldn't make work and we had to shelf that and we pivoted and we moved to something else. So to see that project come to fruition and reach readers is like all the sweeter to me because of knowing where we started and then we didn't get that immediate traction straight out the gate. So it's really a joy for me to see that build with clients and to work together collaboratively to help bring them along that journey.
No, totally. And I was going to say I refer to that all the time. That so much
Yes.
of that process in that moment a couple years ago was also knowing that I could trust and rely on your insights of saying, hey, here's where I feel we are. Here's how I think we should pivot for
Yeah.
this reason. And then also just bringing into the creative conversation what the economic realities were in terms of bringing something to market that
Yeah.
also sell. And I think
Exactly.
those types of lessons have been invaluable, and we will definitely get into more of those in the third part
Yeah.
of the section, which is
Yeah.
hard
And it's
facts.
funny also
Yeah.
sometimes like thinking back on the things that didn't click and the things that don't work, like there's so much learning in there, like thinking back now, like that wasn't the book that was gonna, make you the bestseller. Like we believed in it at the time, right? And we loved it deeply, but like I don't think if that book had published, it would have been at the level of success that I think the Book of Luke is going
Well,
to be. So it's also like you have to also trust the process sometimes, that where you're not getting traction is maybe not where you should be pushing, because maybe if you
it's
push
true.
there, you're going to have your career be at like a different place than it has the potential to be.
100%, even just introducing yourself in a different way, because I
Yeah.
have said I feel like I needed to get that first book out of my system because it relied so much on personal experience. And I think I had to then prove to myself I was more than lived experience and could create things that I had nothing in common with.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's funny the point about branding, because that actually is the perfect segue to then chat with Carlo, who has done so much. Because I also know, Carlo, in addition to your incredible work with these corporations and these influencers, you've also done a great bit of work with nonprofits as well. Because I know you and Kahina, our another PA2 board member, are so close. Even when I was stage managing for you guys back in your DZAC days, um, I'd love to hear from you, since you have played with brand management and things in so many capacities and levels. What do you love about this wide variety of entity that you help?
Thanks, Lovell. Really great question. So there's this lovely quote by this author called Neil Gaiman that I think about a lot when it comes to my work. He said that fiction is a lie that tells us true things over and over. And I often think that marketing is kind of that. In my mind, I like to think of marketing as fiction. And the point of marketing, no matter what industries, whether I'm working with a nonprofit, whether I'm working with cereal brands, whether I'm working with streaming brands, creators, it's about telling a relatable human truth. And it's not about the products and features, it's about the benefits and what is the story around that, right? You think of any great marketing comms, you think of Nike, you think of Apple, you don't think of a slab of computer, you don't think of a pair of shoes. You think of honoring great athletics or disrupting the world and thinking differently, right? So I'm fascinated with that. It's like, how do I take a product or a service as something's trying to deliver, but inject it with this sense of as I like to say, like this grandeur. So it's interesting because I started in one industry and then I moved over to lots of different industries, and I thought marketing must be so different in lots of different industries. And yes, there is a lot of nuance to speaking to different audiences and understanding the problem that a market is trying to solve, but the process of drawing out a great story from a founder, a great story around a problem they're trying to solve, and how we frame it and how we tell that story in a way that strips away complexity and just focuses on a simple narrative that cuts through and that makes people talk. That process is the same no matter where you are. And actually, thinking about training in the arts, as Lovell, as you know, I also used to be in the arts myself. I was a dancer. Um, and I've also, like Don, I've also worked inside tech companies. And so I have definitely noticed that most of the innovative risk-taking people that I've worked with, no matter what the industries are, all have some kind of artistic background. And they have that resilience. Now, I've also noticed athletes have a lot of those traits. Athletes also, when it comes to resilience, they're great. But the one thing that artists do that I think applies to business that nobody else can do is create something where nothing existed. They have this comfort with invention that I see a lot of people in the business world struggle with. And usually the ones that are good at building departments or building a new product or idea usually have some kind of artistic background to them. So that's a little bit about, how I view my role, what I love about it, and how I think it applies to artists.
No, that was so helpful. It was lovely seeing Dawn nodding along with so much of what you were saying. I feel like you two have a lot in common to talk about offline. Um, well, pivoting now to the second portion of the conversation, I'd love to just kind of go around the digital table again and zero in on one particular time you were working with a client where you learned something incredible that you then really took to kind of everything moving forward. Just kind of like a big like light bulb moment of like, oh, this is something someone needs to do for everything moving forward. And Don, maybe we can start with you with that one.
That's, you know, what comes to mind isn't necessarily a specific example, but building on the comments of both Carlo and Stacy, I am overwhelmed with appreciation by those founders and or artists, or the combination of the two, who can really be bold and courageous in believing in their conviction, in sort of filling that, creating that white space or addressing that white space that Carlo just referenced, and letting nothing get in the way of them achieving their vision, or at least doing the best they can with their vision. And I find boldness to be an incredibly powerful trait. And and I would submit for for our audience this evening that artists probably are the most bold people of all the founders that I work with, because of of the personal risk, sometimes even greater than you might think that a founder of a tech company like I was would be taking, because it is so personal, and there's so much there really is so much that they put that one puts out in order to deliver on that vision. So I would say boldness is the best example I could refer to in terms of what makes the difference in one's efforts, whatever they are, in the creation of content, in the world of artists, or in the creation of a technology in the world of someone in the STEM field, for example. But really, really powerful trait and a powerful capability. I think you're on
I'm
mute
still
level.
muted.
Yeah.
Oh, am I good? There we go. Did we make it? But no, I was just going to say it really made me think what you just said about boldness, about something that when I've been a producer, I've often said to directors is you need to really identify the non-negotiables that you have. Like the big thing about this project that you will never compromise on, no matter what amount of money is being waved in your face, because if that's the thing that makes it special, you need to identify that. And especially when you're starting out, you probably can really only have one or two non-negotiables. Like you need to be adaptable, capable of pivoting. But like even with like Book of Luke, as Stacy knows, like I was always very open to any changes, but the one thing that I was always kind of adamant on is the hero must always be gay, and these other characters who are non-white, their ethnicities are not changing no matter what anyone says, because that makes it a different book. um and I think that's something that we all kind of interfacing with our careers, it's like it's important to know what the things are that you won't compromise on. Just to throw a little bit of film stuff in there. But Stacy, I will toss it to you now. What was a moment where you really learned something with a client that you now take as advice for any client?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I remember, I don't know why I keep talking about her tonight, but maybe because I was just on the phone with her this afternoon, but with Kim Michelle Richardson, when we sold her first book, um, she had written this one novel, and the publisher came to us. We had only one publisher that was interested, so we had no leverage. But in this sort of divine gift from the universe, the publisher, when they made us their offer, said, "We'd like to make it a 2-book deal. We'd like to buy this book and your next novel." And I had no leverage to make this happen, but it was sort of this like it was this opportunity. And the author said to me, she was like, "Well, I can't take that deal. Like I don't have another book. Like I haven't written another book. I don't even have an idea for another book. I've only done this one time. I don't know if I can ever do it again." And I have to say, and I just said to her, like, we have to take this deal. Like you this is a golden opportunity. And even if you don't believe in you right now, like I believe in you right now. And I need you to just like take that faith and let me believe in you for the both of us. And as I mentioned now, 7 novels down the line, I think it was the right choice for her. And that was a really instructive moment for me in terms of knowing like when to push and when not. Because I think it ultimately comes down to like, what are you pushing someone towards, and like what is the risk? For her, the risk was saying yes to something that was really vulnerable. She didn't have the confidence in herself. And I said to her, okay, we'll take the money from that, like half of the deal, put it in a bank, don't touch it. And if you never write another book again, you'll pay it back. No harm, no foul. We'll get out of the deal. Like, that's okay. To me, I felt that was a low risk scenario, but the risk of saying no was significantly greater because if we turned down that opportunity, said, no, we'll keep it a one book deal. The first book didn't perform that well, then where do we go from there? We might have been sort of cutting short our career before we had the chance to really let it take off. And I think about that moment a lot because I think so much of my job is knowing, I'm not the artist at the end of the day. It's not my career. So I have to always be navigating when do I push and when do I let it go? Like, it's ultimately not my decision at the end of the day. And there are moments where it's really not appropriate for me to do the pushing. I can think of a recent situation where an author was deciding between, she had two offers, she was in the lucky position of having two offers from different publishing houses, and one was offering her more money, and I felt that they were the stronger publisher for very specific reasons that are not worth going into. But she had a discomfort with this publisher for, again, very specific reasons that are not worth going into. But she had a very strong instinct that this was not going to be the right home for her. And if I had pushed her to take that deal, I felt like that was a risk that was not worth taking, because if she was unhappy there at the end of the day, would have pushed her into this relationship and this publishing opportunity that maybe had some more upsides that I could see, but that she had an instinctive discomfort with. And I can't like push someone when they're feeling like this is the wrong creative partnership for me. That's not where I push. I can push someone to be like, believe in yourself, have confidence, let's seize the moment, let's take this opportunity. But if someone's saying like, this doesn't feel right to me, no matter what I think I know, I really have to like trust their creative and artistic instincts and know that that is not the place for me to push. So like knowing when to sort of do that like boosting and like pep talk and like get someone over the edge, and knowing when to say like it's actually not my place and it's actually not my decision, is like a very significant I think of my job and how I navigate the creative relationships that I have.
Well, it's why you're so good at your job. I can attest from firsthand experience.
Yeah.
Carlo, similar question for you. Like, what have you learned dealing with a specific client in terms of launching their brand?
Yeah, I'll talk about a very recent one. And though they're not in the arts, they're affiliated with some arts organizations, so I think it's relevant. So there's a nonprofit I work with called Fight for Children. They're very interesting because they actually don't do any direct programming with kids. They are, think of them as a backbone organization. They're almost like a network of 47 other organizations that do provide everything from soccer to horseback riding to ballet to students from low income communities. And they try to make sports accessible and free and easy to access. And they have this belief that sports, particularly with communities from low income backgrounds, can really change their life trajectory, right? Like sports is a tool through which they become a better person. They had been really struggling for a very long time to figure out how to talk about themselves. And I think a lot of organizations, artists, nonprofits run into this problem because oftentimes everyone wants to talk about the big problem that everyone's trying to solve, but people don't get specific about the specific angle that you are bringing that is making your contribution to this bigger problem unique. And that's what we really spend time on, because when I would push them, I'm like, well, what makes you different? They would say, well, the reason people should invest in us is that we get more young people into sports that they wouldn't get otherwise. And I was like, well, every organization that works in that space can say that. That's not specific enough. So like let's like push. And it's funny because what I learned as well is we were pushing, and then we had an aha bulb moment when when the chief development executive officer was just telling me a story about herself. So she was saying to me, she was like, the funny thing with sports is that um, everybody's obsessed with like your typical sports like football or basketball, but sometimes people find very unconventional sports or sports that they're not really exposed to, and that changes their life. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And she told me about a story of her brother who really struggled with sport with team sports because he found the environment very intimidating, and he ended up going into bowling, which is a bit of an unusual sport, but he loved it. It was like a solo thing, and it really helped him just gain confidence. And I said, that's it. That's kind of your angle because you're a network of many, many different sports organizations with everything from bowling to water polo to equestrian horseback riding, like things that a lot of these kids from low income communities would never be exposed to. And so we created a whole messaging about how for them, the problem they're trying to solve is discoverability of any type of sport. And they're saying that yes, there are lots of kids that naturally fall into basketball and football, but what about all these other sports that you might not even know you like? And if you don't meet them, then you'll never know. And so that's how we've crafted something that, not any one of their individual members could say on their own, but really taps into their structural advantage. And I think this applies to a lot, like all of my clients, we always start with this. It's like, what specific problem are you trying to solve? It can't be too big. It can't be too aspirational. We need to bite a chunk off. So that's what I would say. And even if you're not an organization, even if you're an artist, I think you can learn from that too. Like, what is the very specific point of view that you are going to bring that nobody else can bring, right? Like that has a theme that everybody can relate to, but is so specific with the way that you look at it that nobody else could see that. So that's something I spend a lot of time with my clients on, and I think about a lot.
No, I think that's super smart. And it definitely, I definitely feel that is something that very much applies anytime that I am sent a script or am developing something. It's really about pinning down, kind of, as one of my teachers in grad school always used to say, the classic question of any project or any story: why is this night like unlike any other night? Why are we kicking this off here? And I think that's a great transition now into the third, and I imagine what will be the meatiest portion of this conversation, which is the lookout portion. And so, for example, just to kick it off, like I would say for me on the film side, because what I'm going to kind of throw at you guys is the question of like, okay, someone is coming to you, you're meeting them for the first time. What are the red flags that make you not want to work with them from that entity? So, like, I would even say for me, if I'm sitting down with a potential writer director as a producer, one of the things that I've developed over the last few years is, especially if I've had the opportunity to read their script beforehand, is I kind of come prepared with a softball note just to throw out there to see how they respond to that feedback. Feedback like that is not in any way earth shaking. And you can tell very quickly in those stakes how someone responds to that will be how they respond on set, in an edit room, to an actor, with a department head. And I will freely say there have been projects that I thought were beautiful scripts that I then turned down the opportunity to work on because I was like, this is a long-term relationship that will be very unhappy. And I also can't imagine subjecting you to other people. And so kind of in that vein, and we can just to shift up the order a little bit, we can start with Stacy. I would say, Stacy, when you get a query letter in your inbox from a prospective novelist, what are the things that you're like, automatically, don't do this, don't do that? Here's how we need to start off this conversation.
Yeah, I mean the query letter, I feel like that that's a little bit more like data based because it's a little bit more like, okay, are you writing to me about like a genre that I represent? Is this like hitting the mark? Have you like represented all the information that you need to accurately present to me? That feels a little bit more like a match. I think like where I often am seeking those red flags a little bit more is actually like in my first conversation with someone that I'm considering taking on as a client. So something where I've read the sort of similar to you. I've read the material. I like the manuscript, you like the script, but I'm actually seeing like, are we going to be able to work well successfully together? And certainly what you just pointed to of being able to take feedback is a significant one. Um, Another one is I I've noticed sometimes people will come to those conversations with a chip on their shoulder about past experiences. And that often also feels very revealing, especially if it's someone who's mid-career, they're changing agents. And it often quickly becomes clear to me perhaps why they're seeking a new agent at that point in their career. If they're actively talking shit about people that they've worked with in the past, look, maybe that person was really shitty to them, and that's totally valid. I don't know, get like my hackles up a little bit at that because it makes me nervous. Like, why are you out here sort of trashing prior partnerships with someone that you're just meeting for the first time? That feels like a very significant red flag to me. The other one, and like this advice, this one sort of feels at odds with an example that I gave before about another client who did go on to have a long and successful career, but taking yourself seriously as an author and like having a vision for what your career looks like. So I'm laughing because I told that story about a client who was like, I'll never write another book again. Obviously she was wrong and it went on, but she I think was in the minority there. You know, frankly, I had a conversation recently with a potential client where I loved her manuscript, but in talking to her about, what she saw for herself in her career, she had a very sort of just happy to be here energy. Like, I'm so glad you liked that book. And like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about what I would do next or what I would want my career to look like. She couldn't point me to any examples of, careers that she admired or authors that she aspired to have a similar path to them, or what she sort of wanted that trajectory to look like. And I really, these are not red flags in the sense that like that person is incapable of having a successful career. Perhaps they are, but more in terms of my collaborative style. I find that I work really well with people who can say to me, like, this is the dream, this is the vision, because I'm much better at being able to help someone realize their dream if I know what that dream is and they know what that is and they can bring that to the table in like a really clear way. So, that I guess that's sort of what I mean when I say like taking themselves seriously as an author, that they have very um specific aspirations for themselves, even if those aspirations might feel lofty. And I have to say, like, okay, Tiger, like let's see what we can do. But like, I love that, let's try to make it happen together. So yeah, I guess those would be sort of a few starting points in like an initial conversation that I would have with someone.
No, it's also funny. It makes me think about what both Don and Carlo were saying about what story are you telling? In some ways, the storyteller
Right.
also know what story they are and like what are they doing in
Exactly.
that narrative.
Yeah, and there's often a mismatch there. Someone's really good at weaving a story on the page, but they're not good about telling a story about themselves. And sometimes the case is that I need to help them, sort of how you do, Carlo, figure out what that story is for themselves and help them be better about presenting it. And I can do that. And it definitely makes my life easier if they have a bit of a story about themselves that they're already bringing to the table.
Well, and there was also something in there, Stacey, you said that I also thought was a very salient point, which is they might have a great career, but can you collaborate with them? And I think that's
Exactly.
something that we all need to interface is that you're not meant to work with everybody. And I think it's a matter of knowing how you enjoy working, what you bring to the
Hmm.
table as a collaborator so that you can kind of suss out what's actually a match. Because sometimes, I
Hmm.
mean, it makes me think of something that a very dear friend once said. Very talented actress. Her name's Hannah Murray. She British. She was on Skin. She was on Game of Thrones as a series regular, and she said to me, "No collaboration should ever involve multiple things at the same time." She said, "You want to keep reaffirming an opportunity to say yes because it allows you to continue to say, yes, I want to be here. Yes, I want to be doing this. Yes, I want to work with you again. Whereas she said that she had always seen so many people was like, oh, we're going to do 3 projects together. And then inevitably, somewhere in there, something goes awry. And then you're either dealing with the contentious work environment or having to extract yourself from one. And so I think it's always kind of being open to the act of working with someone in addition to just that first thing because life changes, relationships change, people's situations change. um Kind of then pivoting over, we'll hand it to Carlo in terms of brands, which obviously can shift and mold at any time. But when you're meeting somebody for the first time, whether it's an individual client or an entity, what kind of sends up your spidey senses about like, oh, this, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't present yourself to people like this.
Yeah, so actually, there are a lot of similarities with some of the themes that you and Stacy mentioned. One question I like to ask myself when I'm sort of potentially working with someone is, are you stubborn with the vision, but flexible on the details? We used to say that a lot at Amazon. And what that means is essentially like you clearly know where you want to get to, but how you get there, you're open to feedback and adjusting and pivoting. And there might be things that pop up that we don't know about. So, are you coming in with an exact 5-step plan already, or are we open to building and testing and iterating together? But as Stacy was saying, I also don't know that I can work with someone who has like no sense of where they're going. So I think, stubborn on the vision, flexible on the detail is a good analogy that I like to think of. The second one, and this is especially common with artists and actually a lot of founders, um, are you going to be the single point of failure for this organization and the work? I.e., are you going to have your hands on every single thing, every piece of comms, because it's just not sustainable. It's not possible, right? And I mean, I manage a lot of celebrity social media and that's always an interesting process because in the beginning they're like really nervous to hand off things to us, understandably so. Are you going to get my voice right? Is it going to feel authentic? And so we build like a collaborative process, but I always say to them, I know this makes you uncomfortable, but there is a way to codify your brand. Even though as an artist you think of yourself as a human, there are some things that actually are coded in the way you deliver, and we need to figure that out and agree on some guardrails and then allow for some experimentation. If the entire business is paralyzed because you take a day off or because you can't respond to 1,000 emails, we're all going to suffer. So I cannot do that, and I have learned that, especially with some artists, to be very upfront about that. The third thing is I try to assess whether they're a know-it-all or a learn-it-all. I struggle to work with people who think they know everything because, listen, the older I get, the more I realize I know nothing. And the world keeps changing so much every day that I'm constantly trying to keep up. And so if my clients don't have this collaborative sense of we're going to learn together and sometimes we might fail, but we're going to take the learning and apply it next time. If they have a fear of failure and they're scared of making mistakes and they're obsessed with perfection, I just tell them, I'm like, I don't think this is going to be a good fit because I don't believe in that. And I don't think that's healthy. So those are my 3 watch outs.
No, that was super helpful. I will now pass it to Don. Same question, dealing with the founders and creators on your side.
I've got to preface my comments level with I just want to each of you talked about some issues that I deal with all the time, but maybe in a different setting. And level, you mentioned, having the artist or the founder being just so focused on a particular problem. The red flag for me is when I talk to founders who want to solve 3 or 4 problems all at once, or address 3 or 4 customer segments, or 3 or 4 use cases. And I always encourage them, succeed with the first one and then take it to a second or third. If they don't have that incredible focus on a particular problem, I get very worried. Stacy mentioned in her comments about sort of knowing your competition, and not trashing them. And I see that all the time. If I find founders who aren't really aware of the competitive landscape, and also actually respect and almost acknowledge some of the great work that some of these competitors are doing, but this is how I'm different. This is how my startup is different, and will address the problem differentially. I get worried because it's either a case, as Carlo just mentioned, of someone being a little belligerent, perhaps, and just not dealing with the issues effectively. And then the other thing, Carlo, you mentioned earlier, which is so true, really understanding the problem and that you're addressing and how you're doing it uniquely differently. So I would just reinforce all those things. But then what I would add, Level, to your question is I, whether it's an artist or a founder, I really, in terms of my due diligence before I invest or, join the board or whatever, who is your customer? Tell me everything that you know or need to know about your customer, your target market. And I want to hear about artists or founders who really understand that question, the answer to that question. And then relatedly, the common phrase in the startup world is, your go-to-market strategy. But how are you then going to actually reach that target audience, that target segment, through channels, through collaborations, through influencers, through, all kinds of means, but having a really succinctly, comprehensively thought out process to reach that customer and to engage them in a way that will make them fans for life. And that's the best kind of customer because they become the viral marketers for your brand or for your company as they share it with others who could also become customers. So those are the other two things I look for.
No, that's so smart, Don. It also makes me think of something that I've often told people, especially when they're starting out, they're like often doing a short film and they're approaching crowdfunding. I kind of tell everybody gets one. Everybody gets one moment where they're going to call their whole networks to come to the barricade and help them, and just being really strategic and specific about when you choose that moment to be. Because like I'll say for myself, like some of my past film projects, I might not have, just because there were more group efforts, I might not have necessarily called in every specific favor because I know I'm saving that for this book launch because that's the place where I'm the only person who's able to call in favors. And so I think it's also about being really strategic, to your point, about how you're activating your project to find that client.
Yeah, and also, Level, just to uh, uh, you're reminding me of just how important, when I talk to a founder, who are the teammates that he or she is bringing into the fold? Um, and because not no one person has all the strengths, as
Mhm.
Carlo was mentioning earlier, to do it on his own or her own. So it's the team and the recognition of the strengths and skills that team requires for success. And most startups that I work with, it's ultimately a team effort and not a singular effort.
100%. We do have a question coming in from our attendees, and I'm actually going to start with Carlo for this one, just because I know you have been recently at the forefront of the nonprofit world. Um, what kind of steps would you recommend to someone who is just starting an arts nonprofit?
Hmm. Definitely, I'm gonna say it again, but think of the specific problem you are trying to solve. And again, I could give an example, you know, with the Dance Institute of Washington, which is a great example of an arts organization that is solving a specific problem with executive director Kahina Haynes, who's also a Princeton alum. She's incredible. Um, and I think the Dance Institute of Washington, for a very long time, was trying to focus on this narrative around equity in dance, which is what they do. But working with them for the past year and a half, I really pushed them to be specific on what equity problem they were solving. Like behind the scenes, Kahina would say to me all these stories about, you wouldn't believe the discrimination that Black dancers face in the ballet world. Everything from accessing point shoes to finding tights that are in their skin color to the kinds of things people say about our body types and our hair texture. And she would tell me all these stories, and I was like, where is all this on your website, on your social media? No one really cares about dance should be made for everyone. Like everyone knows that in theory, like we understand that, but talk about that, talk about the problem obsessively. And we started doing that, and we saw a huge shift in engagement, particularly on social media. And not to flex, but we managed to get the Dance Institute of Washington to generate more engagements last year than Alvin Ailey on social media because we just got Kahina to just talk about the problem that no one wanted to talk about and that people were skirting around. So again, like, and a lot of people might say to you, sanitize it, right? Like, don't say this, you might alienate. Good marketing is about being incredibly ruthless about the specific people you're going after. And you have to understand that that means you're going to leave some people behind, and that's okay. And when you try to speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So just be really specific and lean into it.
I think that's so smart. It also makes me think, I heard someone say once, things that are truly genius have imperfections. Like that strong flavor confronting what you're actually looking to solve and not being bashful about that. For every person that you might turn off, you're probably gonna hook 10 times
Yep.
that. Um, but no, I think that's super smart. And obviously, everyone should go look up the Dance Institute of Washington. Kahina was on the cover of the alumni magazine within the last year. It's a phenomenal organization. Um, and kind of as we now wrap up, I'd love to throw kind of one last sort of Hail Mary question to each of you, which is like, what's the one super technical thing within your field if someone is running past you and they're saying, I'm going off to do this, that you could scream out at them? And like, I know for me, if someone was running past me and saying, I'm going to make a film, the thing I would like scream out at them is like, have multiple people look at your budget. Because I know like the first film I ever produced, um, the guy who had drawn up the budget had numbers in there for certain things that if Lovell today saw that, within 30 seconds I'd be like, a grip package for that amount of time for all the lights and like equipment for that for 4 weeks, you're looking at anywhere from $35,000 to $40,000, and it was there in the budget at a whopping 2,500. Um, and like at the time, because I did not know, I was just like, cool, great, awesome, that's affordable. And then we start getting quotes from all these vendors, and I was surprised. And I think maybe if someone else, if I had like shared that budget with someone else for their feedback, maybe I would not have been so surprised 5 days before shooting was supposed to commence on that film. So similarly, Don, I will come to you. What's the one thing you would shout to the person running by saying they're going to start a startup?
The 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 one thing I would say is network with your Princeton network, your professional network, your friends network. uh, the more people who collectively are in your in your on your baseball field, if you will, the more likely you will be successful. Use the collective power of your network to support your North Star and your vision.
Wonderful. Stacy, what do you say to that jogging author?
Get an agent. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, it does help to have someone advocating for
Oh,
you.
I mean, also, as you know, you and I have talked about this. Agents in the book world are just
Yeah.
guardian angels. It's so much different than film and TV. You guys are so much more involved and protective of your clients.
Yeah, we're arguably too involved, but that's a different problem for a different day. I guess I would say like never take the first offer would be my running advice because I think especially when you're starting out, there's so much just there's so much like temptation and like, oh my God, you want to publish my book? Or it's like, you want me to be here. It's just so exciting. But that's never whatever someone's bringing to you at the beginning is never where they're willing to land. So always be willing to like say no, hold your ground. Don't like operate from a place of fear that like if I push back on something and know my worth, this is going to go away. The worst that can happen is they say no. So it's always worth like pushing back gently, respectfully, um, and holding out for that better offer. And if it doesn't come, then that's still, you land in the same place, but never just say yes right away.
So smart. Something that I have gotten better about myself.
Yes, you have.
Carla, what do you say to the sprinting celebrity who's saying, "I'm going off to build a brand"?
This is gonna sound really mean, but it's true. Nobody cares. And it's a really important reminder. And I often have to say this to my clients, like, remember that you are obsessed with this service, with this company, with this poster, with this social media post. Lot of people don't. And if you always start with that, and I know that's a very skeptical and annoying way of looking at things, but that's why every single piece of creative or every campaign that I look at, I start with nobody cares. How do I make them care? And it's a really good forcing function for you to create something that is interesting, that is going to make people stop and notice, whether it's because it's inspirational, it teaches them something about themselves, it makes them look at the world differently. Like, that is what great marketing is. But people can get very attached and emotional about things they create, and being able to have that distance and to say, what if nobody cares, is very important. So yes, nobody cares is what I always tell everybody about marketing.
I
Remember
My
that.
God.
I think that's genius.
This is such good advice, Carlo. I feel that so deeply. I feel like, yeah, because for authors, they're just constantly like, this is their vision, this is their book. They care about it so much, they just assume everyone else will as well. That's very
Yep,
good. Feel that.
yep.
Yeah, no, it's so true because I think the flip side of that is, and that is why you must be your own best cheerleader.
Mhm.
No one will ever advocate for you as strongly as you will want to be advocated for unless you do it yourself. But on that note, we're reaching the end of the hour. I just want to thank all three of you for taking the time to do this. It was I feel like I got tremendous like support out of this as I now go to take a product to market in 3 weeks. So I will definitely be using advice from all three of you. But before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask really quickly, Don, anything you want to promote or plug before we say goodnight tonight?
Uh, I just want to plug PA2, incredible organization, lots of very enthusiastic supporters from all perspectives, including obviously all of us on this call. And it's just great to be part of that of the organization.
Amazing. Stacy?
If you read one book the next year, make it the Book of Luke. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. That's why you're a phenomenal agent. I adore you. Carla, what about you? Anything you definitely want everyone to know that they can check out, follow you, anything?
I publicly launched my new agency literally 2 hours ago on LinkedIn. So talk about
Oh my
timing.
gosh.
This is the time where I'm going to ask my network to tap in. Go check it out. Narrative Twist, narrative-twist.com. We launched with 8 clients. I've been sort of secretly building this out over the past year. And I would love to onboard 1 or 2 more clients early Q1 next year. So if you need good marketing help, check it out. We are designed to provide Fortune 500 marketing expertise, but very flexibly and affordably in ways that big marketing agencies can't do. So look me up.
Fantastic. Here it is on Instagram. I am following live.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you, Lil. Thank
I,
you.
I I will recommend it to people. I think Carlo was just his own best advertisement over the course of this hour. But thank you all so much, Victoria. I will pass the mic back to you. Anything else you want to say before the evening concludes?
No, that was great. Thank you all so much for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening. More updates from PA2 will be coming as the holidays come in and the new year starts up. But otherwise, wishing you all safe and happy holidays. And thank you so much for your time tonight.